Welcome to the podcast summary of King of Pop. Today's story is about a greatest hits album that really wasn't one greatest hits album at all. Michael Jackson's King of Pop turned into a surprisingly elaborate fan-voted project, with different countries getting different songs, different formats, and in some cases totally different ideas of what belonged in the canon. It also says a lot about how labels were reviving legacy catalogs in the late 2000s, and how Jackson's King of Pop identity was being reinforced as both a tribute and a marketing strategy. So this is part fan culture, part market research, and part branding exercise with a very shiny box set attached. Sony BMG did something pretty unusual here. Instead of putting out one global compilation with the same songs everywhere, it turned King of Pop into a country-by-country fan curation project. In most markets, people voted from locally tailored pools of songs. So the album people got in Germany wasn't necessarily the one people got in Japan or Spain or Australia. That meant fans weren't just buying a collection, they were helping define it. By 2019, there had been 28 versions of King of Pop, which is kinda wild for a major label compilation. Usually these things aim for one definitive package. This one went in the opposite direction and embraced fragmentation. And one especially interesting detail, it was never released in North America. For such a globally visible Michael Jackson project, that absence really stands out. What Sony was really doing, beyond the fan-friendly voting angle, was treating Jackson's international audience like a giant source of market intelligence. Which songs do people in each country actually claim as their favorites? Which eras travel best? Which deeper cuts have local life? That gave each release a sense of regional ownership. Fans weren't being handed a universal answer to what Michael Jackson meant. They were getting a local version of the answer, shaped by their own market's listening habits and loyalties. So the project encouraged regional identification with his catalog. At the same time, it sold a global superstar. That tension is what makes it more interesting than a standard best of. The voting menus were not small. Belgium had a pool of 124 tracks. Germany had 121. Hungary had 122. And Japan had 120. When you give people that much to choose from, you're not just asking for a ranking of the obvious singles. You're opening the door to album cuts, archival material, Jackson 5 songs, and tracks that hardcore fans quietly insist everybody else has been sleeping on for years. That's why the finished editions could end up reflecting very different balances between blockbuster hits and more devoted fan territory. Across all that variation, only one song showed up on every single version: Billie Jean. That makes it the one absolutely stable pillar in this whole sprawling experiment. However much taste shifted by country, however many rare tracks and local preferences entered the picture, Billie Jean stayed put as the uncontested essential. The differences between editions went way beyond swapping a track or two. Some of these releases became collectibles because they contained songs you simply couldn't get on other versions. Italy was the only edition to include the full version of Carousel. The Philippines got Gone Too Soon. Korea included Keep the Faith and You Are My Life. Spain got Unbreakable. Australia's version is especially striking because it included relatively uncommon tracks like Sunset Driver, In the Back, and You Can't Win, plus the full 9-minute version of the Thriller Megamix. That's the kind of thing that makes collectors start comparing imports and opening spreadsheets. Belgium even had 2 competing editions, and in the UK, there was a standard release as well as a 3-disc deluxe version packed with rarities and classic 12-inch mixes. China broke with the whole participatory setup. Its edition, released on December 18, 2009 after Jackson's death, was selected by Sony rather than voted on by fans. That makes China the clear exception in a project otherwise built around the idea that local audiences would help shape their own version of the album. The title itself matters here. King of Pop didn't just describe the contents of the album, it formalized a brand that had been building for years. The phrase is tied to Elizabeth Taylor's 1989 Soul Train Awards presentation, when she gave Jackson an Artist of the Decade award and used that now famous honorific. After that, MTV, VH1, Fox, and Jackson's label all helped amplify it. During the Dangerous era, especially around black or white. That label became part of a coordinated identity campaign. So by the time this compilation arrived, King of Pop wasn't a casual nickname anymore. It was an established piece of cultural packaging. That means the album functioned as more than a greatest hits set. It was also a birthday-era reaffirmation of status, a way of saying this catalog still sits in a category of its own. This didn't appear out of nowhere. It followed Thriller 25, which had already shown that Jackson's back catalog still had major commercial power. Thriller 25 reached #1 in 8 countries, and Europe hit #2 in the United States, and made the top 10 in more than 30 national charts. That's a huge signal for a reissue. In the US, it sold 166,000 copies, just 14,000 short of the top spot, but it couldn't enter the Billboard 200 because it was classified as a re-release. Instead, it topped the pop catalog chart for 10 non-consecutive weeks. So when King of Pop arrived, Sony already had proof that there was real appetite for a carefully repackaged Jackson catalog. The industry lesson was basically that old material could feel newly eventized if you framed it the right way. King of Pop also delivered commercially before Jackson's death changed the context around everything. It reached #1 in Poland and finished second on Germany's 2009 year-end albums list. That matters, because it shows these localized catalog releases weren't just novelty packaging. They could perform at a very high level on their own, especially when the artist's global image was strong and the regional targeting was smart. So the strangest thing about King of Pop may be that it tried to celebrate one towering pop identity by making the album itself less uniform, not more. Same artist, same legend, but 28 different ways of deciding what the essentials were. And honestly, for a catalog this huge, that might be the most honest, greatest hits idea of all. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.